Picture this.
Yeah.
You are sitting on your couch, scrolling through your news feed on the morning of March 5, 2026, and you see a headline that feels, at first glance anyway, like your standard run-of-the-mill Hollywood celebrity gossip.
Right, the Netflix and Ben Affleck thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The headline says Netflix is acquiring Ben Affleck's artificial intelligence company. And your initial reaction is probably to just roll your eyes.
I mean, it sounds like a vanity project.
Right. It sounds like a fun little tech meets celebrity crossover that doesn't actually mean anything for the real world. But I promise you, this is actually a massive, glaring signal about the future of the media you consume every single day.
It is very easy to get distracted by the bold-faced names in a headline like that. You know, Ben Affleck, Netflix, AI. It's absolute clickbait gold. But beneath that glossy surface lies a fundamental shift in how the entertainment industry actually functions, and more importantly, how it spends its money.
And uncovering that shift is our mission for this deep dive today. We are going to figure out how artificial intelligence is fundamentally rewriting the economics of Hollywood.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. So to do this, we are looking at a fantastic, highly detailed analytical article by AI thought leader Johan Steyn. He published this over at a4business.net. And to give you the full 360-degree view, we're supporting Steyn's analysis with recent hard-hitting reporting from TechCrunch, Reuters, The Guardian, The Wall Street Journal, and Forbes.
It is a phenomenal stack of sources.
Yeah, they really pulled the curtain back on the business of show business.
And synthesizing all of those sources reveals something crucial right out of the gate. The true disruption happening in Hollywood isn't that sci-fi fantasy we always hear about.
Oh, you mean the idea of an executive typing a single text prompt into a computer?
And an AI generating a whole perfect 2-hour movie starring digital actors.
Right.
That is a total distraction from the reality. The real revolution is happening in the cost curve of filmmaking. It's about how the unglamorous, highly technical back end of creating a movie is being completely transformed.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the specifics of this acquisition and what this technology actually does on a day-to-day basis are just fascinating. Let's look at the news itself. Netflix is bringing a company called InterPositive in-house. InterPositive was founded by Ben Affleck back in 2022.
Right.
And with this acquisition, Netflix is absorbing the technology entirely, and Affleck is joining Netflix as a senior advisor.
To understand the sheer weight of this move, we have to look at what InterPositive actually builds.
Which is what exactly?
Well, the context provided by recent coverage in The Guardian and Reuters makes this very clear. InterPositive develops AI tools that are specifically designed to handle real, tangible production constraints. They build software that enhances cinematic quality and ensures editorial consistency across a project.
Okay, but I always assumed the expensive part of making a movie was paying the A-list actors or renting out city blocks or blowing things up on camera.
Sure, that's what we see as the audience.
Right. So what does enhancing editorial consistency actually mean on a working movie set?
It means we have to look past the camera. This is not about replacing actors with digital avatars or generating artificial scripts. The technology is entirely focused on technical post-production tasks.
The heavy lifting that happens months after the director finally yells cut.
Exactly, after the actors go home.
And the sources highlight some very specific tasks here, which really helps ground this concept. We're talking about using AI for reframing shots, correcting lighting inconsistencies from one take to another, and wire removal.
Yeah.
If you think about it, you can kind of look at these tasks like painting a house. Everyone loves picking out the paint color.
That's the fun part.
Right, that's the creative part,
Yeah.
the acting, the writing, the directing. That's what you envision when you think of a beautiful room.
Yeah.
But nobody talks about the days of unglamorous, tedious sanding, taping off the baseboards, laying down the primer that you have to do before you can even pry the paint can open.
I love that analogy because it gets right to the heart of the friction in creative work. What's fascinating here is that this technology acts as a workflow amplifier for exactly those parts of the process.
The boring but essential parts of production.
Yes, the boring but essential parts. If you want a professional-looking living room, you cannot skip the sanding and priming.
Right.
And right now, in Hollywood, that sanding and priming costs an absolute fortune. It requires an army of highly specialized technicians sitting in dark rooms for months on end.
And the Wall Street Journal's reporting pointed out a shared vision between Netflix and InterPositive on this front. They are explicitly framing this merger as using technology to empower creators rather than replace the creative vision.
It's essentially about giving filmmakers much better, faster power tools to do all that tedious sanding.
Which brings us to a massive bottleneck in the entertainment industry. Why is post-production such a financial black hole?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to understand that Hollywood has always been shaped by constraints. The final product you see on your screen, that polished, beautiful image, is the result of overcoming massive logistical and financial hurdles. Post-production is perhaps the ultimate gatekeeper in this industry.
The ultimate gatekeeper. That is a bold term.
Think about the specific steps Johan Steyn details in his article. He lists editing, conforming, color grading, VFX cleanup, and finishing. These are highly specialized, wildly expensive processes. This is the alchemy that turns raw, flat-looking digital video footage into something audiences inherently trust as cinematic.
Okay, before we move on, let's do a little translation for the listener, because those terms get thrown around a lot in behind-the-scenes documentaries, but they sound like a foreign language.
Absolutely.
What does a process like conforming or color grading actually entail?
Let's break it down. When a movie is shot, the digital files are absolutely massive. They are way too big to edit smoothly.
Because they're super high resolution.
Right, so editors work with smaller, lower quality files called proxies. Once the edit is locked, meaning the director is happy with the sequence of the scenes, someone has to go back and painstakingly match those low-quality edits to the massive, original, high-quality files so the movie can be finished.
Okay.
That matching process is called conforming. It is deeply technical, incredibly tedious, and leaves zero room for error.
So it's literally making sure frame 450 of the low-res version perfectly matches frame 450 of the high-res version.
Precise.
That sounds exhausting. And what about color grading?
Color grading is what gives a movie its mood. Raw footage straight from a professional camera actually looks very flat and gray. It's designed to capture as much data as possible, not to look pretty.
Right.
Color grading is the process of manipulating those digital files to give, say, The Matrix its iconic green sickly tint, or to make a desert scene look blisteringly hot and yellow. A professional colorist goes through the film shot by shot, ensuring the lighting matches even if one angle was filmed at 10 a.m. and the reverse angle was filmed at 3 p.m. when the sun was behind a cloud.
And then you have VFX cleanup, which Steyn also mentions.
Yes, and this isn't building a giant CGI dragon. This is painting out the boom mic that accidentally dipped into the frame.
Yep.
Or erasing the safety wires attached to a stuntman doing a backflip.
So the wire removal.
Exactly. Historically, this meant an artist literally going frame by frame, 24 frames a second, digitally erasing a wire. It takes weeks of billable hours for just a few seconds of screen time.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Steyn introduces this concept of the cost curve, and this is the absolute core of his analysis.
Yes.
If AI tools can suddenly compress the time and the friction of these finishing steps, if that tedious wire removal or that massive conforming process suddenly takes hours instead of months and thousands of dollars instead of millions, the definition of professional quality changes overnight.
The power dynamics shift entirely.
It is no longer restricted strictly to the people with giant budgets and huge teams.
When you watch a blockbuster, you know instantly that it's a blockbuster, even with the sound off. That feeling, that polish, is the result of millions of dollars spent in post-production. But Steyn makes a vital distinction here about what democratization truly means in this new context.
Because when people hear democratization of filmmaking, the immediate thought is, oh, great, my neighbor is going to make the next cinematic masterpiece on his smartphone in his garage.
And that is absolutely not what the sources are suggesting. This democratization doesn't mean everyone magically becomes a brilliant filmmaker. An AI tool that fixes lighting cannot fix a terrible script or bad acting.
You still need a compelling story, talented performers, and a genuine creative vision.
Yes. What it means is that many more people, smaller studios, independent creators, documentary filmmakers who don't have multi-million-dollar relationships with high-end post-production houses can now cross what Steyn calls the professional quality threshold.
The threshold that makes audiences actually take a project seriously when they see the trailer.
Precisely. If an indie film looks and sounds just as polished, color-corrected, and visually flawless as a $100 million studio tentpole, the audience stops judging the budget and starts judging the story.
The barrier to entry for top-tier visual credibility has just been permanently lowered.
Completely.
If this technology makes post-production that much faster and cheaper, it makes total sense why a volume-driven machine like Netflix would want to own it outright. Let's pivot and look closely at the buyer here. Why Netflix?
Well, if we look at some of the financial analysis we pulled, Netflix's business model is unique. While their massive global distribution network is a huge advantage, their real secret weapon is their ability to produce content at scale.
Right.
They make a staggering amount of material across dozens of languages and genres. And if post-production costs and timelines shrink because they own the AI tools that automate the tedious work, Netflix can ship more of that content and they can iterate on their successes much faster.
So it's about speed.
It is about speed. This entire acquisition is fundamentally about competing on throughput. Lower friction means streaming platforms can take significantly more creative bets. If they have a budget of $50 million, they don't have to put it all into one massive sci-fi show and pray it becomes a hit.
They can greenlight 10 mid-budget sci-fi shows for the same cost.
Exactly. Because the back-end finishing process is no longer draining the budget.
I want you, the listener, to think about your own experience for a second. It's 8:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. You've had a long day. You're sitting on your couch, scrolling through your TV, looking for something to watch.
You've all been there.
We have. And the sheer volume and variety of shows you have to choose from on that screen is directly dictated by this back-end pipeline shift. If Netflix dramatically reduces the time and money it takes to put that cinematic polish on a new series, your menu of options expands exponentially.
The choices you make in your living room are driven by this exact technological bottleneck breaking open. It is a direct, unbroken line from server farms running AI algorithms right to your television screen.
And that brings us to the ripple effects. Because a structural shift this massive touches absolutely everyone in the entertainment ecosystem. Let's break those ripple effects down, starting with the immediate benefit for creators.
Right.
Steyn paints a really clear historical parallel here. He notes that digital cameras and cheap editing software lured the barriers a couple of decades ago. Filmmakers suddenly didn't have to shoot on wildly expensive 35mm film stock.
Exactly. And in that same vein, this AI-assisted post-production makes a true studio-grade finish accessible to significantly smaller teams. The competitive advantage is going to shift away from the studio executives who control the most capital to the creative teams who can learn to design the smartest, most efficient workflows.
But of course, there is another side to that coin, and that is the deep anxiety felt by Hollywood labor. You can't talk about automating the tedious parts of filmmaking without talking about the people whose entire livelihoods depend on doing that tedious work.
We have to look at this impartially, as it is a very real economic reality playing out in real time. Steyn puts it bluntly in his article, when costs drop, someone's hours drop.
I want to make sure we define who we are talking about here. The sources mention the impact on below-the-line workers. What does that term actually mean in the context of a movie budget?
In Hollywood budgeting, the line separates the creative drivers from the technical crew. Above the line refers to the directors, the producers, the writers, and the star actors.
The people whose names are usually on the poster.
Right. Their salaries are usually negotiated as flat fees before production begins. Below the line refers to everyone else. The gaffers, the grips, the makeup artists, the editors, the colorists, and the visual effects artists. These are the people who are typically paid hourly or weekly rates. They're the ones actually building the movie frame by frame.
So when Steyn says someone's hours drop, he is specifically talking about those below-the-line technicians who bill for the weeks it takes to remove wires from a stunt scene.
Exactly. The industry debate is rapidly evolving right now. It is moving past the broad philosophical panic of whether AI is allowed to be used at all. That ship has sailed.
The technology is here.
It's here. The conversation is now focused on very thorny, highly specific contractual questions between the studios and the labor unions. Questions like, what exactly counts as replacement, and what must be disclosed to the audience and the unions when AI is used?
And you can see why that's such a hard thing to define in a contract. If a visual effects artist used to spend 40 hours painting safety wires out of a chase sequence, and now an AI tool provided by InterPositive allows them to do that exact same task in 1 hour.
Right.
Is that artist being replaced? Or do they just process 40 different shots in the time it used to take them to do one?
That is the exact tension Steyn highlights. It's a question of whether the technology augments the worker to do more or simply eliminates the need to pay them for their time. The article stresses a really important call to action for the industry as a whole. There is an urgent need for clear norms, robust union contracts, and total transparency regarding how these tools are deployed. Without those guardrails in place, there is a major risk that these efficiency gains result in a silent race to the bottom for below-the-line workers, where their billable hours evaporate and their specialized skills are devalued.
The industry really has to figure out how to integrate these powerful new tools without completely hollowing out its own middle-class workforce.
It's an incredible balancing act.
Okay, so we've got the indie creators getting new superpowers
Yeah.
and the labor force facing a massive structural transition. Let's bring it back to the end user. What does this mean for you, the person buying the movie ticket or paying the monthly subscription fee?
Overall, the sources we're looking at suggest this could be a major net positive for audiences. Because the cost of achieving that cinematic polish is dropping so dramatically, we are going to see a massive surge in creative diversity.
Niche stories that previously couldn't justify a big budget because studios thought the audience was too small will now get made.
Because the financial risk is so much lower.
Right.
Furthermore, we will see more international voices producing content that reaches global quality standards. You are going to get to see stories from parts of the world and from independent minds that look and feel just as epic and visually stunning as a traditional Hollywood summer blockbuster. The playing field of visual quality is leveling out.
But there is an inherent risk here, which is heavily highlighted in the reporting. And that risk is volume without curation.
It is the dark side of the throughput model.
If it becomes incredibly cheap and easy to make something look flawlessly professional, we're going to be facing a potential flood of content. The sources paint a picture of a media landscape that could easily overwhelm our attention spans. Think about it. If everything you scroll past looks like a $100 million movie, how do you know what is actually worth your time?
It becomes white noise.
Exactly. It could seriously weaken audience trust if we are constantly bombarded by glossy, cinematic-looking projects that are completely hollow, with no compelling story or human element underneath the polish.
That is the inherent danger of competing purely on throughput and scale. Just because a studio can ship 50 beautifully polished shows a month doesn't mean a single one of them is going to be worth watching. A beautiful image can't hide a boring script forever.
So what does this all mean? When we roll up the acquisition of InterPositive by Netflix, the demystification of the post-production tech, the shifting cost curve, and the complex ripple effects for labor and creators, what is the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive?
I think we have to look back at Johan Steyn's powerful closing thought in his analysis to really sum this up. He argues quite convincingly that the next decade of Hollywood will not be defined by who has the biggest budget. It will be defined by who has the smartest pipeline.
The smartest pipeline. It really changes how you view the whole industry.
It does. This isn't some magical fantasy of effortless push-button filmmaking. It is a very real, very mechanical shift in economic barriers and industry power dynamics. Netflix buying Ben Affleck's AI company is the opening bell for an era where finishing a film and crossing that professional quality threshold is driven by smart technology workflows rather than sheer brute force capital. It fundamentally changes who gets to play the game and, more importantly, who gets to win.
Thank you for breaking that down. It takes a celebrity headline that most people would just scroll right past and turns it into an absolute masterclass on media economics and the future of entertainment.
My pleasure.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering question to ponder on your own. We spent this entire deep dive talking about how artificial intelligence is going to make it incredibly cheap and accessible for absolutely anyone to achieve that flawless cinematic studio polish. But if visual perfection becomes cheap, easy to produce, and absolutely everywhere, will audiences eventually stop trusting perfection? Will we see a future where flawed, slightly unpolished, or raw aesthetics actually become the new ultimate marker of human authenticity in film?
It's a fascinating thought.
It is something to think about the next time you marvel at a perfectly lit, flawless shot on your screen. Keep questioning what you watch, keep looking for the real story behind the headlines, and as always, keep feeding that endless curiosity of yours.